My name is Danny Fenton and I'm an aeromodeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. So I'm going to show you something now that's a little bit ahead of times, but I did have a viewer that came on and said they were about to start working on a Corsair, a glass fuselaged Corsair, and they were going to add panel lines. And I realised I hadn't shown you how to do overlapping panel lines. I've shown you the butt panel lines in the last video on the cowl. So what I'm going to show you on this one is how you do the overlapping panels. On the Chipmunk, the fin is probably the easiest one to look at first off. Now, it only has the two panels really. It has a leading edge section and the main body section. The panels, as far as I've always ever seen, always overlap so that the lip is in the lip is higher on the leading edge to the trailing edge. So this panel will be above this panel. So what they'd do is they'd put this one on first on the full size, and then they'd put this one on and it would overlap this panel, and then there'd be rivets on the leading edge side of the panel. So what I'm going to do is just show you how we replicate a raised panel line along there. Now normally I would prime this first and then I would draw my lines on the primer. I'm going to go straight into creating this panel line onto a clear resin finish, and then we'll add the primer afterwards. When I do this panel line, which is done with tape and adding a filler or a high build primer, I will also fill a couple of dings in the leading edge while I've got the stuff to hand. So without further ado, let's get on to marking this out. Then I'll mix some filler, we'll skim it in there. I'll touch up that little bit there, and I'll touch up the two little dings, the three little dings in the leading edge. So the filler's had plenty of time to dry, and all I'm going to do is attack it with quite a coarse paper. This is a 120 aluminium oxide paper. I don't want to sand it, I want to cut it. As I've said many times before, don't press hard, let the paper do the work. Teaching you to sand again, aren't I? I'm just going to sand this edge, and I'm going to feather into this and sand onto the tape. Okay, we've got a little bit of glass filler on this side of the tape, which I'll sand off once we remove this tape. So then you just take hold of the tape and peel it back at 45 degrees and flat to the panel, like that. And then you've got a nice ridge. So what I'm just going to do is take these lumps off here. What I could have done is used electrical tape rather than that PVC lining tape, which is much wider, and then it would have been a lot easier and less messy. You also have to consider whether or not the line is deep enough. One of my heroes in aeromodelling is Dave Platt, and he always used to say, less is more, and I'm a firm believer in that. If you can see it from 10 yards away, then it's too much. You need to know that there's something there, but not necessarily see it until you get a bit closer. Now I'm just going to tickle it with some 400. To give you an idea of how that looks, I'm just going to dust some grey on this just so you can see. And when that dries, that'll be a really nice clear ridge on there. We'll see. Come back in a bit once that's dry. So you can see I'm trying lots of different techniques here and lots of different methods. I tried a beige coloured high build primer, but I didn't like the way it was going on, so I've abandoned that again. And I've gone back to using the grey primer, the normal primer, and putting 3 or 4 coats on. I've also increased the thickness of the tape to a double thickness. Now you can either do it by laying 2 pieces of tape one on top of the other, as I've done there, but there is a possibility that you won't get them perfectly lined up. So what you can do is lay 2 pieces of electrical tape on top of each other, and then you cut right down the middle of the tape, or cut along the edge of the tape, and that cut then means that that edge is perfectly aligned. and then you use that tape to do this. I wouldn't normally have done it this way, but you know, it's all about experimenting and that sort of thing. So what I'm doing is I'm building it up a little bit higher than I normally would with the 2 layers. Then when I peel this off, I'll be able to put another layer to do the rear. And 1 will probably do it, maybe 2. But I don't want those 2 layers that go on the back to fill up my gap to the front. So that's why the front is a little bit more pronounced than I would normally do it. I'll probably just use the 1 piece of tape. Anyway, we'll see how it goes when it all dries. Right, now we can take the tape off and see what the end result is. And there we have a nice prominent ridge. And there we go, that'll do, I think. Now we'll just put 1 more coat on, just to see how it looks. Anyway, as you can see, the line is still there, so it doesn't get lost. I think the lesson from all of this is I've deviated from the way I normally do it, and the lesson is don't don't deviate. So get the finish nice over the whole area, then do your panel markings. See, that front part is lovely, it's primed nice and the marking is lovely, but when I came back to do this edge, I've now got a really difficult task ahead of me to try and sand right up to that line. And I may put some tape along there just to protect it while I sand this area. So really the lesson there is make sure it's all prepared properly and finally before you even go near panel lines. And I do know that. I've just tried to do it differently just to see what would happen. So as you can see, we now have the ridge nice and crisply on the fin, and it's the same on the other side as well. We have a nice crisp line on the fin. So the lesson from all of this is get the panel completely finished and primered and ready for paint before you put the panel line on. It's much easier. So I hope I haven't put you off with all this leaping about and doing different styles and techniques and everything else. That was not my intention. And we'll be doing some more panel lines and bits and pieces like that all the way through this fuselage build. So you'll see it again, and I'll I'll maybe explain it a little bit clearer on the next one. I mentioned in the video that I used a beige high build primer as well, and I tried that, but because the spray pattern was so narrow, it actually made it a bit of a mess, and I had to clean it all off and redo it. So I'm sorry if the video was a little bit disjointed, because when I looked at the final footage, I'd actually done 3 sides of this fin, and I couldn't really see a way of editing altogether. So I hope it hasn't been too disjointed and that it's ruined it for you. I'll try and do better on the next one when we do panel lines, possibly on the tail plane or other parts of the fuselage. I don't know yet, but you get the idea. You can either build it up with filler up against a tape edge, or you can spray primer up against a taped edge. Either way works just fine, and gives you a nice subtle edge. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.